Okay, folks, you can see the background has changed. Maybe it reminds you of the background from podcasts from before, because I have temporarily come back to this apartment on campus before I head out of the campus forever. But anyway, let's continue now on a nice, interesting topic. Again, brief summary of a nice paper, Steering Plant Soil Feedback for Sustainable Agriculture. We have talked about sustainability of agriculture, emissions from agriculture, reducing emissions, enhancing sinks, reducing sources, food security, water, food nexus, everything. But this is, slightly different approach to thinking about how we can still use nature-based solution kind of approach to managing the plant soil feedback to produce sustainable, food production, to produce food sustainably, let's say. The challenge of producing food at low monetary cost comes with high environmental impacts as yield maximization by excessive fertilization and chemical pest control drive farmers away from using the natural multifunctional potential of soils. From the first sentence itself, you know where we are going. We already know low tillage, organic fertilizers, organic farming, reducing irrigation, water use, and so on. So we are going to come back to some of those topics in this review articles, but also add a few more things to see what we can do to manage the plant soil feedback better to produce food sustainably. We show how the ecological concept of plant soil feedback can be used to restore the capacity of agricultural soils to provide nutrients, suppress pathogens, and enhance crop resilience sustainably. We review how recent advances in molecular and multi-omic methods, soil management, and crop diversification reduce negative and promote positive plant soil feedback, emphasizing the need for rhizosphere microbiome engineering and soil restoration strategies. Many technical words there. Multi-omic is basically genomic and proteomic and so on that we will see in a minute. And crop diversification, old idea, still coming back. And the rhizosphere microbiome is, of course, the entire soil microbiome associated with the root system and the symbiotic relations, etc. And soil restoration is important because human activities have constantly reduced soil carbon content, which has cascading negative effects on water holding capacity, nutrient uptakes, erosion, crop yields, etc. Right? Applying nature-based plant soil feedback principles would enhance transformation to more sustainable agricultural practices that secure food production by restoring natural soil functions while we simultaneously mitigate climate change. Okay, core benefit is to increase soil carbon sequestration. What are the challenges to applying plant soil feedback in agriculture? Of course, population is expected to grow, food demand will increase, but intensive industrial farming practices have, increased green revolution came along, allowed, to avoid Malthusian crisis, starvation to death, etc., as was predicted by people like Paul Ehrlich and so on. But we are still relying on synthetic fertilizers and pesticiders with severe ecological and environmental problems, pests, land degradation, eutrophication, loss of biodiversity, and declines in ecosystem multifunctionality, which means rhizosphere, the soil carbon, water, root system, other vegetations, worms, insects, everybody depends in a holistic way in this ecosystem. But we perturb it and focus on maximizing food production, then we end up, making the ecosystem multifunctionality somewhat dysfunctional. And then we have the monoculture problems, and obviously that increases along with climate change. Lack of resilience to extreme drought, rainfall, temperature, pests, and pathogens. So as warming happens, growing season may grow, Growing season may get longer, but it also means pests don't die during frost days as they should, and you get higher soil respiration, microbial respiration, aerobic respiration, which has other consequences like reducing soil carbon as well as increasing vulnerability to disease, pests, and so on. So several studies have pointed out that agricultural practices may benefit from novel ecological concepts that have advanced our understanding of interactions between plants and abiotic and biotic properties of soils. Testing these novel ecological concepts in agriculture, has led to exploration of how plants and soils may be managed for enhanced sustainability of food production systems. Okay. Here is a brief schematic of how plant soil feedback from agriculture to natural ecosystems and the pathways to sustainability can be thought of conceptually. So in the past you thought about crop rotation as one major way to deal with suppressing pathogens. In the present we have made it much more complicated, so we have plant coexistence, plant diversity, plant invasion, plant community production. So invasive species, if you think about rice cultivation by paddies, basically you're trying to deal with weeds, right? So plant soil feedback effect, we will not come back to some of this. I won't go into all the details, but here you have the various factors that are considered that we'll look at in a minute. And then you have the multi-omics that we already mentioned, which includes gene editing, synthetic biology, epigenomics, and cultural I made it so small even I can't. Transcriptomics, proteomics, and so on. And you are going to think about the future where there is a farmland level action in terms of intercropping, rotation, and cover crops, so crop breeding, nutrient management, cropping design, system design, as well as conservation practices. Are they new? We have discussed these elsewhere, so we'll revisit them with some additional considerations. And at individual plant level, which would be new if we get all the way to using these multi-omics, positive feedback and negative feedbacks to not only food production and crop yields, reducing water use and increasing soil carbon, but also the ecosystem services, so biodiversity, not just of vegetation but also the soil microbiome, because you are talking about holistic ecosystem functioning even at the rhizosphere level, right? So here, what are the symbols? The concept of plant-soil feedback is widely applied in natural ecosystems in investigations of plant community dynamics. Crop rotation was developed to counteract negative plant-soil feedback caused by host-specific pathogens and nutrient shortage of crops grown in monoculture. If you keep producing the same crops year after year, the soil microbes begin to get, begin to lose their own full functioning, and then new pathogens can come in and affect the crop yields and everything else we are striving to accomplish. Just increasing production by doing monocropping may work for a few years, especially if you start to use irrigation and fertilizer, but eventually soil health goes away. Then you begin to have other issues that cannot be controlled anymore with pesticides and fertilizers, like soil losing its nutrition completely. Okay. Subsequently, a combination of technological developments and ecological principles have transformed the traditional pathogen-focused approach to crop rotation into a broader synthesis for promoting soil health and ecosystem function, so more of a nature-based solution. In the figure, alpha A and beta B here represent the plant soil feedback effects of soil that has been conditioned by plant A and B on their own growth, so self-feedback, respectively. Alpha B and beta A represent the reciprocal plant soil feedback effects of soil conditioned by plants A and B respectively. So there is a self-limiting or self-negative potential feedback and cross feedbacks. So plant soil feedback effect in that sense. They represent reciprocal plant soil feedback. The sum of these feedback effects, so alpha A minus alpha B minus beta A plus beta B, indicates the magnitude and direction of pairwise feedbacks. So you can go and think about how feedbacks add up to A and B, and what the sum of the feedbacks means for this multi-crop, let's say, system. Okay, we're not necessarily saying it's a crop, but we are talking about food production, so essentially you can think of crop. Our aim here in this review is to discuss recent advances that could be used to develop strategies to enhance positive and or reduce negative plant soil feedback effects on crop yield and on ecosystem functioning in agricultural systems, which we will see as a table. So specifically we focus on dissecting plant soil microbiome interactions on two levels: mechanisms through which individual plant species or genotypes select, promote and harness microbial communities for favorable growth and development outcomes, and two, approaches for optimizing farmland management strategies to strengthen synergies between crop growth and microbial driven soil function. We aim to explore how the concept of plant soil feedback could broaden the understanding of plant soil interactions in agriculture beyond plant enemy interactions or pathogen interactions to establish methods for sustainable and nature-based food production. Okay, implementation will require entire other discussion on incentivizing these approaches. But anyway, manipulating soil biota to steer plant soil feedback effects. Remember, I'm being brief, so I jump around from section to, well, I jump ahead from one section to the next by skipping a lot of stuff as I did here. The rhizosphere comprises the soil that surrounds and is directly influenced by plant roots, as we saw. It's a dynamic interface in which physical, chemical and biological interactions occur between plant roots, soil physics and chemistry, and communities of soil biota. Structurally, the rhizosphere can be divided into three zones: the endorhizosphere, the inner root issues such as the cortex and endodermis, and rhizoplane, the root surface, and the ectorhizosphere, the first few millimeters of the soil layer immediately adjacent to the root, where microbial activity and biochemical gradients are most pronounced. Plants release wide range of compounds to the rhizosphere through exudation. Exuded compounds range from low molecular weight primary metabolites, including sugars, amino acids, and organic acids, to polymeric substances such as mucilage and cellulose. So a lot of technical things which either you are aware of or you will have to look up, or just get the sense of this paper, which is trying to find ways that we can holistically manage plant soil feedback to get rid of some of the bad practices we have developed over the decades, almost centuries, because through the Holocene this has happened, but Industrial Revolution has accelerated this chemical process. So exuded compounds range from amino acids and so on. Roots also exude secondary metabolites such as antimicrobials, nematicides and flavonoids, which together with primary metabolites do many things, which together with primary metabolites play key roles in microbial growth and assembly of microbial community, mediating symbiosis and defending against pathogens and pests. So nature has a natural system to deal with, living together and keeping out pathogens and invaders. Additionally, other soil organisms such as protists, nematodes, microarthropods, and larger soil fauna influence the microbial soil community by predation, bioturbation, and other means. These interactions make the rhizosphere a hotspot of biological activity, which is essential for nutrient cycling, disease suppression, and overall soil and plant health. And quiet, I was lost in my thought. I'll try to edit it out. But anyway, effects of agricultural practices on microbial functional groups and resulting plant-soil feedbacks. Plus, minus, and question mark symbols, so you know the feedbacks, promoting, inhibiting uncertain effects of agricultural practices, etc. The feedback effect column summarizes the net plant-soil feedback outcome mediated by these microbial shifts and is expressed as positive, negative, and uncertain, reflecting the expected impact on plant performance. So we'll look at the influencing factor like cropping pattern, the practices of monoculture, rotation, and intercropping. We know the descriptions: accumulation of pathogens due to continuous cropping, increase of biocontrol agents, decrease of pathogens by forming suppressive soil under monoculture. Symbiont effects, here you have promoting increase of biocontrol agents, decrease of pathogens. Pathogen to pest has a negative impact. Accumulation of pathogens is promoted. Decomposer, we don't know. In these cases, feedback effect is negative and positive. So these are the references. So obviously reading such tables in a podcast becomes tricky unless I dwell on each one of them and explain or discuss, which I'm not going to do. Similarly, rotation and intercropping have impacts on soil biodiversity, beneficial microbes, and decreasing of pathogens or pests. And you can see that we know some things, we don't know some of the things, and we have to increase our understanding to make this idea of managing soil plant feedbacks effective. Other influencing factors, agrochemical input like mineral fertilizer input or pesticide overuse, or organic inputs like manure, compost, bioorganic fertilizer, organic farming, and of course crop breeding, which can make things nutrient efficient genotypically, or pathogen control as well genotypically, and you increase pathogen resilience, let's say. Grafting, which has happened over since basically the domestication of the wild wheat, rice, jowar, everything else, right? So obviously they will have various impacts like nitrogen mineralization and utilization, protecting the plant against pathogens by enriching beneficial microbes through these pathogen control genotypes and grafting. This is as opposed to just spraying insecticides and pesticides. So will they be symbiont? Will pathogens and pests grow or reduce? What will the decomposers do, because you want to convert organic matter back into soil? Feedback effects could be negative, positive, or uncertain depending on what specific avenue you are looking at, and lots of references, of course, beautiful list of references. Tillage we have discussed already in drawdown and reducing emissions from agriculture. Cover cropping is also being discussed, and we kind of know that they have been discussed a lot and they are effective, but it depends on what you are aiming for. If you're just trying to do industrial farming and maximize crop yields, then probably you don't have time to be worrying about these sorts of things of cover cropping, tillage, and 600 acres or sometimes 6,000 acres of one crop being grown, corn, wheat, cotton, whatever it is, then certain choices are made that are not always good, right? Enhancing positive feedback by selecting beneficial microbes. Plants establish associations with specific microorganisms, and they know how to do that because they have evolved to do that. The rhizosphere microbiome, of course, plays a key role in plant growth and health. The recent advances have uncovered molecular signals involved in shaping these communities, such as flavonoids that mediate rhizobial associations, and quercetin and strigolactones that influence AMF signaling and colonization. Other compounds such as exudated phenolics like coumarins can, I don't know why I made a little accent there, coumarins can promote the microbiome to facilitate nutrient acquisition, for example, by mobilizing iron, micronutrient that plants need. Thus, targeted manipulations or engineering of specialized metabolite pathways could be used to attract and maintain specific beneficial microbes. So again, lots of references, but you can see the details now instead of just gross management that we talked about before. These are getting very specific to farm level and plant level as well. So here is a nice figure discussing some more of this. Manipulating soil biota to optimize plant soil feedback effects at the individual plant level. We propose two complementary approaches to mediate plant soil feedback by manipulating soil biota. A plant-oriented approach that involves signal transduction, root exudate, phytohormone management in situ to recruit and restructure the microbiome. And secondly, a microbiome-oriented approach that consists of isolating, engineering, and introducing synthetic microbial communities, syncoms, to enhance positive and decrease negative plant soil feedback. Plus minus symbols in parentheses of course indicate positive and negative interactions respectively. And always the caveat is whenever we do engineering approaches, there could always be unintended consequences, hopefully no Frankenstein experiment. So here we are, plant oriented to microbiome oriented. I won't read all the details, but we are looking at signal transduction gene modules. So that's a technical term in, let's say, synthetic biology. Root exudates, of course, flavonoids, quercetin, strigolactone, and coumarins that we mentioned. And we are looking at the rhizosphere here in a schematic way. So nutrient cycling, stressors like drought and salinization, crop residues, and root exudates, positive and negative feedbacks with beneficial microbes that we mentioned, formulations, rhizobia, AMF, and syncoms, organic acid, amino acid, benzoxazinoids, chemalaxin. So I'm not a biologist, and as I always admit, we read these because these are useful and we must understand them at some level without getting necessarily technical expertise in them. They are useful, and some people are not happy with such an approach of just learning enough. But I think it's good and important. You are a disciplinary expert in something, but you have an earth system view of everything that's happening. Okay, pathogens, phytopathogenic toxins. So there are feedbacks with decomposers like layer layer, toxic compounds, allelopathy, nutrient availability, and secondary metabolites. Please follow up if you are interested in those technical details. There are lots and lots of references which provide all these days. You can just use ChatGPT on each word to get enough knowledge. Okay, reducing negative feedbacks by suppressing pathogens. So obviously there are various approaches mentioned here, like genetic screens that have revealed key pathways of pathogen resistance. For example, mutations in Feronia, FER receptor kinase decrease basal levels of reactive oxygen species in roots after pathogen invasion, which is related to the elevated abundance of beneficial pseudomonads in the rhizosphere. Do we know what that means? But basically that means we have advanced our knowledge of exactly how the pathogen resistance is affecting, how pathogens are affecting plants and how we can increase the pathogen resistance of the root systems and the rhizosphere. Okay, potentials of soil decomposers. Of course, soil decomposers are a big part of the solution and a holistic ecosystem approach. Here, decomposer communities generate positive feedback as plant litter tends to decompose more efficiently in its native environment. There is a home field advantage in that sense, accelerating litter breakdown and nutrient release, which is needed for the roots. Conversely, soil carbon loss through decomposition without adequate supplementation with soil organic matter can generate conditions that lead to negative feedback effects when the consequences are that nutrients become less available. In addition, root exudates can also prime soil microbiomes to access mineral-associated organic compounds and accelerate carbon loss. So you want to retain soil carbon, you want the microbiome to efficiently function. What do? They take organic matter, consume it, and produce preformed nutrients that the plant then takes back to produce what it's trying to produce, right? A very holistic system in a natural environment. Doesn't mean there are no perturbations. Climate always changes. Ice, at various time scales, as we have discussed, natural perturbations do exist, like wildfires, floods, droughts, pest infestations, etc. But the system has a certain resilience, which we affect by, disrupting the system at a very rapid scale and with chemicals that they have never seen before. Challenges and opportunities of translating microbial functions into practical use then. Despite the growing interest in using microbes for crop growth promotion, microbial proliferation and colonization in field settings are highly variable and influenced by many factors, and climate change is of course hammering this system very hard. It's a common experience that microbial inoculants released into soils may be degraded within weeks to months, even when applied in high loads. To ensure functionality while colonizing root surfaces in the rhizosphere, inoculants need to compete with the existing community of soil microorganisms and withstand predation pressure from soil fauna. Hence, attention has been drawn to plant-soil feedback opportunities to exploit and utilize customized indigenous microbes. So now we are talking about high-level advanced soil-plant feedback management, which is new compared to the things we discussed before in terms of organic farming, no tillage, manure, etc. Right? Crop management for generative, I'm thinking AI. Crop management for generating positive plant soil feedback. Although crop breeding has led to an average 1% annual yield increase in staple food crops, pathogens and pests are estimated to cause 20 to 30% of annual losses in global crop productions. This is like a spamming business, The more you build spam filters, the more the spammers get across the filters. So pathogens are always trying to, and pests are always trying to stay ahead of what we are doing to increase crop yields, including pesticides, and they just become better and better at negating and even more than compensating for our advances in this sense. Okay, this is in part due to domestication of plants for high yields, which has reduced the genetic diversity of modern cultivars and impaired their ability to establish beneficial associations with the rhizosphere microbes. Intensive agriculture further exacerbates this problem by promoting the buildup of soil pathogens. In this context, a central question is whether positive plant-soil microbial interactions can be restored by a combination of crop breeding, nutrient management, and soil conservation practices. Jumping ahead, integrating plant-soil feedback into a crop microbe breeding. I won't read all the details, so let's look at this figure here. Integrating plant-soil feedback into the cropping system management at the field level. So we went from molecular level to plant level, now to the field level. Customized agricultural management aims to create a more habitable environment to generate positive plant soil feedback. Optimized cropping systems, so crop microbe selection, crop diversification, and cover crops are considered in this optimized cropping system. And a healthy soil management where you consider optimized fertilization, organic matter amendments, and minimum or no tillage, and these together have the potential to improve microbial diversity and functional complementarity. So you're not just focusing directly on crop yields, but you're considering the soil microbiome, soil plant feedbacks to holistically and in a very sustainable way increase crop yield. So here, look at the various details. Here you are looking at holistic crop microbe breeding, crop diversification, and cover crops. Very nice. Higher abundance and diversity, benefits. Higher potential for pathogen control, benefit. Higher diversity of beneficial microorganisms, definitely a co-benefit. So you have biota, crops and soil here. We already talked about direct, indirect feedbacks from within each one and across each other. So remember, there is always some sort of a competition as well, even though they manage resources in a way to survive. So recruitment and feedback between crops and biota, so diverse food web and multi-trophic interactions, accelerating soil biological processes, healthy environment between biota and soil, and then supply of resources such as nutrients and water, and carbon input between crop and soil, leading to higher soil organic carbon, good structure, water holding capacity, so virtuous cycle kicks in. So you also do fertilization management, organic matter input, and minimum or no tillage. Okay, so that's how you would integrate plant soil feedback into crop microbe breeding. Optimizing nutrient management. In agricultural soils, crop yields is primarily influenced by field management, external inputs, and in natural soil biological processes. Under low input conditions, crop yields depend largely on soil biota that make nutrients available by decomposing plant materials and soil organic matter, and the amount of nutrients mobilized may be variable but generally low. Supplementing nutrients by fertilizers or other external inputs may increase crop yield by up to 50%, but come at the cost of reducing the diversity and effectiveness of beneficial microbial groups that enable natural nutrient cycling. We know that, okay? So excessive fertilizer application may inhibit the activities of beneficial microbes such as symbiotic mutualistic AMF and rhizobia that trade off nutrient supply for plant-based carbon sources. Fertilization also may increase abundances of parasites and pathogens. The challenges for sustainable farming is to obtain as much of the potential yield as possible while mitigating negative soil feedback, which requires balancing the quantity and quality of external nutrient supply while maintaining the functional capacity of the soil community. For example, applying polymer-coated controlled release urea in deeper soil layers may diminish the decline in the abundance of root rhizobia while maintaining high yield potential in soybean maize rotation. So depends on what else you do. Monocropping with slow release fertilizer may not be as effective as its use in this soybean maize rotation. Similarly, a low phosphorus application rate, let's say at 25 kilogram per hectare, enhances AMF colonization and abundance compared with high phosphorus treatment, so 100 kilograms per hectare order 4 times. Optimized nutrient management can increase crop yields by greater than 10% while reducing nitrogen input by approximately 15%. However, further research is needed to assess the relationships between crop yields and microbial functions under varying resource input and environmental conditions. Let's see how far. So I've been saying AMF, maybe I should have defined it, but it's arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi, which is a symbiont which is now studied more and more because it seems to have many functions that we don't even know about. So I have 3 more slides, but this podcast is already about 33 minutes. Maybe I should just plow through and finish it so that we don't should I? Let's see. Yeah, maybe it's worth making another podcast and leave this here. Okay, so just remember what we are talking about and how useful this could be. The key is always how to implement these things, especially convincing industrial farmers who are just riding along making a lot of money, but then will the early adopters be subsistence farmers or somehow people who are realizing that they are actually slowly degrading the soil quality and losing the efficacy of the external inputs on increasing crop yields and so on. So I'll come back and conclude.